Okay, so this particular lecture isn't coming out of your book. It's coming from a different book. But I think it's important that you understand what a definition argument is, not because you necessarily will ever write an entire essay that is a definition argument, but you may find at one point uh, you need to make a definition argument first before you can take your larger argument on. So, an example of this is years and years ago, I had a student who, I don't know how it even came up. I try to keep this out of the classroom, but she made the point that President Obama was not a Christian. And I started, kind of arguing back and forth with her on this. And it wasn't until later that I realized, well, wait a minute. We needed to determine first what definition of Christian we were going to agree on. And then you could determine whether Obama fit the criteria for that. So, this is an example of where you might need to establish the criteria of what you're going to argue for first before you go on to argue. So, that's what the definition of definition argument is. You set out the criteria. You're setting out whatever it is being defined and whether the criteria has been established or not. If it hasn't been established, then you have to establish. And for vague abstract terms, this is very true. I mean, right now, and I absolutely believe it, the people in the medical field are being seen as heroes, and they are. And this is not something that we normally consider. It's only during this pandemic that we've come to recognize that they are. But then you have to determine what is a hero, what makes a hero, or I had a discussion once with a student of whether the student was a patriot just because he says, I love my country. Does that make you a patriot? Now, it turns out that by the definition in the dictionary, yes, that's all you have to do. My definition is no. I felt like having been raised in a military family and having served in the military, I tend to feel that it takes a little more than just saying, I love my country to be a patriot. Uh, it doesn't mean that you have to serve in the military to do that, but I feel, anyway. So we had a different understanding of patriot, and this is what you're trying to do. What criteria is there? Are you willing to accept the criteria? So I wasn't willing to accept the criteria in the dictionary of what a patriot is. I'm like, no, for me it means more. That may be, the word itself may be defined as that, but the actual act of being a patriot for me means more than just, putting your flag out on July 4th. All right, so you've got different kinds of definitions. So what you have is a formal definition is you categorize the item into next higher classifications. I'll give you an example in a second, and then provide criteria to differentiate from other items within the classification. So, for example, a fish is a cold-blooded aquatic vertebrate with jaws, fins, and scales. So there's your definition of a fish that most people would tend to agree with. This is unlike cold-blooded aquatics such as sea snakes. All right, so I've given you the criteria of the next higher classification and shows how the snake differs from that. Now you have operational definitions. So these are concepts that defy formal definition, like within a dictionary. They tend to be used more in natural and social sciences. So here, binge drinking is defined as five or more drinks in one sitting for a man, four or more for a woman. All right, so that's how binge drinking could be defined. I tend to have trouble with that because I tend to think that how you're affected by drink uh, has much more to do with how big a person you are. I mean, if you're 6'8" and weigh 300 pounds, I'm thinking you can drink more than five drinks without it being binge drinking, whether you're male or female, right? And so you have to question sometimes when the criteria are given. All right, now the way you build a definition argument is for a definition of an example, something is or is not courageous because it has or does not have features such as A, B, and C. So then you have two steps: establish criteria for the categories being defined and convince the audience the particular case meets or does not meet the criteria. You may have to write, an argument for the relevance of the criteria. Just laying out the criteria may not be enough. You may have to say this is why you should accept that criteria. Okay? So again, that's pretty short, but I just wanted you to be aware that there may be times that you need to begin your argument with a definition argument first so that you can then expand on that into the main argument that you're making. All right, that does it.